The Propagation of the Gospel, 6. The Council at Jerusalem, Second Missionary Journey, and Introduction of the Gospel into Europe. The first marked division of sentiment in the infant church was concerning the relation of the converted non-Israelites to the Jewish ceremonial law. The controversy appears to have broken out at Antioch, where the Jewish element of the population was large, and great numbers of both Jews and other nations had been converted. The more rigid Jews among the converts held not only that all the converted Jews should carefully continue to observe the Mosaic ceremonial ordinances, as Jesus said, but, the actual ones, not necessarily the conservative ones, but that the non-Israelite converts should also be required to conform to them, doubtless regarding Christianity only as a development of Judaism, in which nothing of the latter was to be abrogated. To this, the converted non-Israelites would naturally object. Well, if they saw that Jesus said that he came not to do away with any of the law, but to refurbish it, not really, because that's the faith that they're accepting. It's about Jesus, right? And with them, Paul and Barnabas, and the more liberal and spiritual of the Jews held. The controversy seems to have reached a stage of grave importance soon after the return of two apostles to Antioch from their first missionary journey. The situation involved was so serious that Paul and Barnabas were sent with a deputation to Jerusalem to consult the apostles and leaders there. The result of the deliberations there is given in the history. It evidently was not perfectly satisfactory to the extremist of the Jewish party. Well, or the Jesus party, more likely. And there are symptoms of disturbance on this account at subsequent points in the scriptural narrative. Still, it was a substantial general settlement of the question. Now, particularly in the political sphere, you could say, I compared the teachings that the Bible attributes Paul and Jesus, and that's not an all-inclusive presentation of contradictions between the two. So this is what this conflict is really about. The city of Philippi, distinguished by being the first point in Europe at which the gospel of Christ was preached, was also noted for several other things. It had been founded or rebuilt by Philip, king of Macedon, and father of Alexander the Great. It was doubtless the birthplace of the latter and the capital of the hereditary domains. It was also in the immediate vicinity that were fought the decisive battles between the imperialists and the republicans of Rome, in which Octavius and Antony triumphed over Brutus and Cassius. At the time of Paul, it was under Roman dominion and belonged to a class of cities designated as colonies, but by this term was meant something different from the modern signification attached to that word. It had a peculiar form of government under its own magistrates, and the governing element of the inhabitants were Roman citizens. There were only a few resident Jews, as it was rather a military than a commercial city, and they had no synagogues, only a slighter structure where they were met for prayer. Acts 15:16. Claudius was the emperor between 41 and 54 of the Common Era Bulgaris. Events of lesson 50 and 51. Controversy concerning the relation of the converted non-Israelites to the Mosaic Law. Paul and Barnabas resisted the demands of the Jewish party. A deputation sent to Jerusalem to consult the leaders there. 15, 1 and 2. Their journey and events by the way. Arrival at Jerusalem and report to the authorities. Opinion of the Pharisaic party in the council. Peter's argument against their demand. Paul and Barnabas show that God had brought salvation obviously among the Gentiles in the absence of the condition supposed to be required. 3 through 12. James's statement of the case and decision against the Judaizing plan and in favor of the simple moral and spiritual conditions. His views accepted and a deputation appointed to bear a letter embodying them to Antioch. 13 through 29. The arrival at Antioch and the meeting of the believers, delivery of the message, and the joy of the church. Silas remains with Paul and Barnabas, who go on with their work. Verse 30 through 35. Preparation for another missionary tour. Dissension of Paul and Barnabas, the cause of it. 36 to 38. What did the desertion referred to occur? Oh, when did it occur? 13, verse 13. Result of the controversy. What are the probabilities of the amount of good and evil growing out of this difference? Does it prove that either was right? Paul's course, 30 through 31. And let's remember that there are different people with some of these names. People say, oh, well, there's only one Moses. It's like, well, I'm not even sure if he was the first Moses. So if you find someone, Moses in a cave, Paul at Derbe and Lystra, conversion of Timothy, his family connections and character, and Paul's purpose concerning him. Why does Paul circumcise Timothy? When he generally opposes the subjugation of non-Israelite converts to the ceremonial law. Well, circumcision wasn't circumcision of the Jews, not Moses, and it seems that actually circumcision wasn't practiced by the Israelites for a time, and the Canaanites convinced them, because circumcision is opposed to the nature that God put us on. Reduces pleasure, reduces immune response, reduces there's other benefits. I don't remember what both males and females. It's the same operation basically. But anyway, so Acts 16, 1 through 3. Do we hear much of Timothy after this? Well, if we don't, obviously, how could you put me through that? Or visitation of the churches and the communication to them of the regulation adopted at Jerusalem. 4. Condition of the churches and the work. 5. Through what parts did they travel? And where were they forbidden to go? 6 and 7. Describe the situation of the regions and the cities named. Arrival at Taras. Where was this? And what famous events of classic interest took place in this vicinity? Paul's vision and call to go over into Europe. The call accepted, because he was still in Africa, wasn't he? The call accepted and the voyage to Philippi. Trace out the course on the map. First preaching of the gospel in Europe. There wasn't some separate Middle Eastern continent or some ridiculous thing like this that people talk about. So over by Turkey, and then you go up into Europe, and Asia's on the other side and Africa's down below. And once you go into Turkey or in Europe, but how much of Eurasia was Europe, I think, was different back then. But anyways, Paul and Silas at Philippi labors among the Jews, a notable convert, and her hospitality, what is indicated by the change in the narrative here in the first person, verse 13, 9 through 15 and 13, okay, gives some account of Philippi, the demoniac young woman, her conduct, the demon exorcised in the name of Christ, which is verse 16 through 18, which is a direct violation of Matthew 7:22 and 23, where there should never be any exorcism, no exorcisms performed in the name of Jesus, no good works, no healings. Jesus will cast them all out as people who do not obey his law. And this is in the context of, hey, don't just call me Lord, do things of, the one that sent me. The Asia mentioned in this text elsewhere in history was simply a proconsular Roman province of no very great extent, embracing the western part of Asia Minor and having Ephesus for its capital. Still a few more items in this program. Resentment of her employers and reason for it, the malicious prosecution, the accusation and condemnation, the punishment, 19 through 24. How did Paul and Silas act, 25. What occurred in the night, its effect on the prison, on the jailer. Why this desperation, Paul's reassurance, inquiry of the officer and his conversion. What did he do further, 26 to 34. Action of the magistrates the next day. Paul's dignified attitude. How did this affect the magistrates and why, 35 through 39. How can he state some of the privileges of a Roman citizen? Were most of the apostles? Are the Jews generally? Are a very great proportion of the inhabitants of the empire entitled to these privileges? Now, okay, there's a civil rights act in my country, but there's been a lot of talk, privilege and all this, but as we see, something in the life of Christ, well, actually, we get this in the other, do what you can with what you have. Make your life spiritual. Privilege, oppression, whatever. You have what you need. Or you have the opportunity to get what you need as opportunity spiritually.